In 2017, Mohammad bin Salman emerged out of nowhere to take the position of Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia.
Mohammed bin Nayef has been removed as Crown Prince, and Mohammed bin Salman, the 31-year-old son of the Saudi king, is now first in line to the throne.
Soon becoming de facto the ruler of the country, with rumors spreading about the poor health of King Salman. Being the fourth son of the king, Mohammed bin Salman by many was not even considered to have the possibility of ever rising to power. But he did, brutally suppressing any emerging opposition. After securing power, Mohammed bin Salman, commonly referred to as MBS, went on to introduce several reforms aimed at bringing in some social freedoms, and for this became popularized even in the Western world.
The young crown prince stripped the clerics of their power, increased women's rights, including giving them the right to drive, and all in a radically short period of time.
Underneath the image of a young and visionary Arab leader, however, lies the tyrant who is prepared to do whatever it takes to consolidate the power in his hands. And when he officially becomes king, there won't be much need for secrecy and shadow power play. As the exiled son of one of MBS's most prominent critics, Khalid al-Jabri, puts it, when he is King Mohammed, Crown Prince MBS is going to be remembered as an angel. First, let's look at how exactly MBS became the crown prince and what being in this position means. When we look at the Saudi Arabian government, it is one of the only absolute monarchies that still exists in the modern world. This means that the king has absolute power and there are no mechanisms available for anyone to oppose his word. Often, however, when it comes to this way of governance, one of the main problems is the succession mechanism. If the monarch has multiple sons, who gets to sit next on the throne? Or what if there are no sons left alive? When it comes to Saudi Arabia's founding king, King Ibn Saud, he had 36 sons who all made it into adulthood and were eager to become the next ruler. To ensure a smooth transition of power and avoid an internal bloodbath, King Saud established a clear succession rule. He obliged every future king to name the oldest brother as a successor immediately upon assuming power. In this way, King Saud made sure that in the case of king's death, everyone knew exactly who the new leader was without the need to fight for power. The person in line to rule became known as the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Thus, even though Ibn Saud had multiple brothers and 36 sons who wanted to become the next king, only the oldest amongst them could lawfully secure the power. Notably, amongst the 36 children of King Saud, 7 stood out because they all shared the same mother, and eventually were labeled as the Magnificent Seven for their superior skills. While the Magnificent Seven did not initially play an important role, their existence is an important component of the later parts of this story. The first crown prince to assume the power of the king was Saud bin Abdulaziz. He was the oldest son of Ibn Saud and managed to stay in power for 11 years, before being overpowered by his younger brother, Crown Prince Faisal, in 1964 through a military coup. Faisal then ruled the country for another decade, before being murdered by a half-brother's son, Faisal bin Musaid, in 1975. King Faisal was replaced by his lawful successor, then 62-year-old Khalid. Khalid stayed in power for just 7 years before dying of a heart attack in 1982. After King Khalid passed away, the throne was passed on to his half-brother, Fahd, the lawful crown prince and the oldest member of the Magnificent Seven, which now finally came into play. Fahd stayed in power for 23 years. During his reign, the race for the crown prince title divided his remaining brothers into 2 camps, his 6 full brothers and all the other living sons of Ibn Saud. Naturally, King Fahd wanted one of his full brothers to inherit the throne to consolidate the power for his mother's bloodline, but the problem was that his lawful next in line, Prince Abdullah, was not a Magnificent Seven brother. King Fahd eventually agreed to give the throne to Abdullah after his death, but only on the condition that Abdullah appoints Fahad's full brother, Salman, the father of MBS, as a crown prince. He was able to legally do so thanks to a major succession rule change, which allowed the king to appoint or dismiss his heirs based on suitability rather than seniority. The rule change also made the grandsons of Ibn Saud eligible for the throne for the first time. Abdullah became the king in 2005 after Fahd died of natural causes at the age of 84. Abdullah went on to rule the country for 10 years. After he died in 2015, Salman took over the throne, just as his elder brother Fahd had hoped. For Salman, however, there was a new challenge. All of the sons of Ibn Saud who were still alive were too old to be named as the next kings in line. Most had only a couple more years to live. Because of that, King Salman decided to look at the new generation and appoint someone from the grandsons of Ibn Saud as a crown prince. The first one chosen by Salman was his oldest nephew, 56-year-old Mohammad bin Nayef, whose father was one of the Magnificent Seven brothers. This, however, was soon about to change. This is exactly the point where Mohammed bin Salman comes into play. Who is he and how did he manage to secure the favorability of his father? Son to King Salman, MBS never enjoyed the popularity within his own family. He had a different mother from his 5 brothers and was often mocked as a son of a Bedouin for his mother's background as a tribeswoman. Even in their youth, MBS and his brothers were separated. Everyone but MBS went on to study at a world-class universities abroad, learning about foreign cultures, while MBS was the only one who stayed in Saudi Arabia and attended King Saud University. However, MBS had something that all others lacked. While they were studying and working abroad, he stayed close to his father and eventually became the favorite son of the king. Without a proper understanding of Western cultures, without any specialized knowledge, and even without knowing any foreign language including English at a respectable level, MBS suddenly was groomed to become the new crown prince. The first position that MBS took in the government thanks to his father was the Minister of Defense in 2015. One notable achievement of MBS in his position is the beginning of the Saudi war with Yemen. In any case, in order to move up the governmental ladder even further, MBS had to overpower Crown Prince Nayef, and King Salman was prepared to help. In 2017, Nayef was summoned by the king to meet at the palace in Mecca. What happened next is a mystery, only with unofficial reports emerging after interviews with Saudi officials present during that day. According to the story told by the press, after Nayef arrived, there was no king to greet him, only MBS's personal agents. Nayef was stripped of his possessions and locked away. He was presented only with one option to remain alive. He had to officially abdicate as a crown prince. This opened the door for MBS to become a new crown prince and to launch a series of purges aimed at taking down anyone who opposed him or his father. A key incident happened in October 2017 during an international investment conference at Ritz-Carlton in Riyadh. Many of the Saudi's richest men were present, most of whom were also parts of the royal family. It was a perfect opportunity for MBS to strike, while his critics from the royal family were also conveniently clumped together. After MBS's brothers and cousins returned to their hotel rooms, they realized that all the pens, razors or glasses were taken out. Anything that could be used as a weapon. All were then detained and locked in their 5-star rooms and given a new prison uniforms. He held them there for several weeks. Only one goal was in the mind of MBS, to make them submit to his rule and transfer all their money and assets to the possession of the crown prince. In total, over $100 billion were transferred to MBS by his guests in a 5-star prison. The Ritz-Carlton episode was just one element of an extraordinary project of centralization. MBS took control of all the security services back from the princes. He installed himself as the boss of the Public Investment Fund. He pretty much destroyed all the influence that powerful families had.
What happened at the weekend is that 11 senior princes, including Prince al-Walid bin Talal, were detained. They're not being thrown into some dark dungeon. They are reportedly staying in great comfort at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel or another similar place. But the fact that these very high-profile establishment figures have been removed, and very importantly, the head of the National Guard, Prince Mit'ab bin Abdullah, has been relieved of his command. That removes, at a stroke, the final obstacle to the Crown Prince having total control over the country.
By late 2017, law, money and security in Saudi Arabia all flowed directly from him. He presented all of this as anti-corruption crackdowns, but in reality, it was nothing more than the persecution of political opposition. In 2017, several prominent members of royal family were imprisoned, including Prince Al-Walid, nicknamed the Warren Buffett of Arabia, who held over $20 billion worth of assets across the globe that were now in the possession of MBS. And what was the reaction of the United States to all of this being done by their strategic partner country? Almost total indifference, tolerance, and in some instances even protection of actions committed by MBS from the Trump administration.
I'm seeing what's happening. It's like a revolution in a very positive way, and I want to just thank you on behalf of a lot of people, and I want to congratulate you. You've done really a spectacular job.
Understanding that America would not try to stop him, MBS became increasingly aggressive internationally. He announced the blockade of Qatar and in 2017 locked up Lebanon's Prime Minister Saad Hariri for his connection to Iran during Saad's official visit to Saudi Arabia.
Lebanon's President Michel Aoun has publicly accused Riyadh of detaining Saad Hariri, who about 10 days ago said he was resigning as Prime Minister in a surprise broadcast from Saudi Arabia, sending shockwaves throughout Lebanon.
By doing this, MBS broke the diplomatic rules established and respected by most countries in the world. Overall, within several months after assuming power, MBS had cleared all the opposition inside the royal family and imposed an aggressive foreign policy. Next came the reforms and the visible transformation of Saudi Arabia. What was once unthinkable became the new norm. MBS opened the country for foreign artists and events, eased the visa restrictions, and allowed women to wear more open clothing, work, and drive cars without approval from a male relative. Significant changes were also made when it came to the judiciary. Before, judges could decide on the sentencing based on their own personal interpretation of what's written in the Quran. Now, however, they had to strictly follow the state guidelines. Notably, he introduced Saudi Arabia to the global sports stage. Since he became the crown prince, Saudi Arabia has been known all around the world for heavily investing in football, martial arts, Formula 1 and many other sports. Football fans know the recent purchase of Newcastle United by the Saudi government, which led to the unthinkable popularity of MBS amongst Westerners. Newcastle fans, dressed in traditional Saudi clothing, were celebrating the new owner, thinking that Saudi oil money would drastically transform the club for the better.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Like, just look, it's unbelievable. Such a sick feeling. Finish work, straight down here to celebrate with everyone.
Being only in his 30s, from the outside, MBS seems like a progressive reformer who brought to Saudi Arabia some of Western culture, while on the inside he has brutally taken down anyone opposing the regime. This is a prime example of how soft power generated by immense oil wells can get you the image of a progressive young reformer despite your past and present actions. In reality, while embracing the Western consumer culture, MBS fully opposes Western democratic values. In fact, under his leadership, the country became as oppressive towards opposition as it has ever been. People are terrified to speak against the crown prince and do not voice criticism, especially amongst other royal family members. Also, if we look at the reforms that allowed women to drive, shortly before lifting the ban, MBS jailed women's rights activist Lujain al-Hathlul, who was advocating for this exact change. In the court, Hathlul was charged with inflicting change to the ruling system. This sent a clear message to the world. Only one man can advocate for change, and this is Crown Prince Mohammad bin Salman. What also notably speaks about MBS's treatment of internal critics is the case of Jamal Khashoggi, a Washington Post reporter who was brutally murdered by the Saudi government. Khashoggi was himself from Saudi Arabia, but lived in the United States and was famous for his articles criticizing the rule of MBS. This, unfortunately for Khashoggi, meant that he was on the list of dangerous dissidents of the Saudi government. In 2018, he was preparing for a new wedding and had to visit the Saudi Arabia embassy in Istanbul to deal with the paperwork. Jamal went in but never came out. A squad of Saudi hitmen was waiting for him there. He was killed, and his body was dismembered with a bone saw. MBS himself acknowledges and takes responsibility for the murder, however denies ordering it.
Did you order the murder of Jamal Khashoggi?
بلا شك لا.
Absolutely not. This was a heinous crime. But I take full responsibility as a leader in Saudi Arabia, especially since it was committed by individuals working for the Saudi government.
In one of the interviews, he stated that if he was to send a kill squad, he would choose a more valuable target and more competent assassins. If that's the way we did things, Khashoggi would not even be amongst the top 1000 people on the list. If you're going to go for another operation like that, for another person, it's going to be professional and it's got to be one of the top 1000. He then made a scapegoat out of other governmental officials for the Khashoggi case, which resulted in a huge fallout for Saudi Arabia. The Western world was shocked, and some companies began pulling out their investments from Saudi Arabia.
A number of major participants in an upcoming Saudi investment conference that dubbed Davos in the Desert have been pulling out left and right. This in the wake of accusations that the Saudi government abducted and murdered Khashoggi at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul on October 2nd.
MBS, however, was not extremely concerned. He knew that after a short while the desire to get Saudi oil money would overpower the need for justice. Indeed, the murder of Khashoggi is now generally forgotten. Then, in 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion in Ukraine, which proved to be the most beneficial for MBS and Saudi Arabia. As a result of the war, European countries who were previously heavily reliant on Russian oil and gas were now looking for the new partners to get their resources from. Oil-rich Saudi Arabia seemed like a perfect solution, and this only further secured the strong geopolitical position that the country is in. The murder of Khashoggi and brutal internal purges conducted by MBS were immediately put on the sideline. The need to secure strategic trade agreements came in first. Even Joe Biden, who had voiced many concerns with the Saudi government during his election campaign in 2019, suddenly took a way subtler approach to dealing with the Crown Prince. The plan that MBS is sticking to now is to continue increasing the dependence of Western countries on Saudi Arabia's oil exports and build up a strong Saudi brand in the eyes of an average Western consumer. And the brand here is the key to understanding most of the MBS's actions. Saudi's sudden heavy involvement in the entertainment industry is no accident, but a series of strategic decisions aimed at replacing the image of a conservative religious Saudi state with an image of a progressive startup that is changing the world. And to say the least, it has been extremely effective. World-famous CEOs and investors all come to Saudi Arabia, praising the MBS and bringing in a ton of cash.
The more I think about it, the more Saudi almost feels like a startup. And Ben, we've talked a lot about what makes startups, but that's the feeling I'm getting right now.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting because I tell, we were just spent quite a bit of time in Saudi, and people, well, what do you mean it's a startup country? And it's funny because it starts with, Saudi has a founder. Now, you don't call him a founder, you call him His Royal Highness. But, he's creating a new culture, he's creating a new vision for the country, he's got, a very exciting plan to execute, and then the people in the country are fired up to do it.
This is all despite open repressions and murder of political opponents by the Saudi government and full control over public speech. The case of MBS is an example of how a ruthless monarch, with the help of power and money, can be portrayed as a young revolutionary leader. In the meantime, the conservatism in society has not gone away. In some places, it has just undergone a costume change. The alternative, however, might be way worse than MBS has ever been. It is true that he helped to put an end to the radical religious control over Saudi society and took an aggressive stance opposing jihadists. If any other leader with a more radical religious ideologies would take the place of MBS, that would be a disaster for the United States, which has invested heavily in the country. Thus, currently the choice is to either work with MBS and support his government, or prepare for another religious war and the possibility of a new jihadist Saudi Arabia. I guess the biggest change of the MBS's behavior might happen when the current King Salman dies and the power officially transfers to MBS. When that happens, will he continue with the current course of actions, or will he only become increasingly violent and oppressive? Given the record of his behavior, everything points rather to the latter.